Hi everyone, this is Amy from the Helms Academy, and today we'll be talking about number place values. So we'll start today by looking at this chart of whole number place values. So you can see on here that there are three sections. You'll see the millions, the thousands, and then a section that has the hundreds, tens, and ones. And they're designated by colors. And each of those sections is separated by, if you look between them, a comma. So a chart like this is really helpful when we're figuring out how to say a number or where the different place values fall on a certain number, because we can plug in numbers that we see to these openings and it'll tell us more information about what the place values are and how we would say it. So a good thing to know about this is that everything to the left is all bigger and everything to the right is all smaller. So you will see on here, for example, on the left side, you have the 100 millions, and on the right side, you have the ones. So just logically, right, if we think about putting a number 1 next to a number 100 million, obviously everything is much bigger on the left side there and much smaller on the right side. And in a minute, we'll look at the decimal place, and that continues. It's always bigger to the left and always smaller to the right. So let's look at some examples today. One is if we just have the number 3, right? Well, if it's a single digit number, we always have to start in that ones column. So we would put the 3 in the ones column, and again, the number would just be 3. Now, let's say we add another digit to that and it becomes 53. Well, now our 5 then would fall in the tens column. If we make that a little bigger, add some numbers to it, we say 4,153. Well, we can use some of those words again to figure out how to say it, right? So our 4 is in the thousands place. So we say 4,000. Our 1 is in the hundreds place. So we say 100, and then we read that 53. And then let's look at one more example, which is the 6 millions. Let's look at another example. We'll add a few more digits here. This one starts in the 6 million place off to the left there. So we'll start by reading that 6 million. I'll jump to the yellows there. 584,000. So we need to make sure we notice that it's 584 and then tag on that 1,000 at the end. And then we still have our 153. Now, we can add more to this by talking also about the decimals. So before we just looked at whole numbers and their place values, this place value chart is just a little skinnier. It doesn't include the millions to the left, although we could add them on ourselves. They certainly still exist here. And it has an addition though to the right here, which are all our smaller numbers, and they're the decimal values. So decimals are not a whole number. It's a portion of a whole number. And so anything that's to the right of that decimal point is going to be less than 1. And the further you get away from the decimal point, the smaller the value of that number is. In the same way that the further you get to the left of the decimal point, the bigger the number gets. So let's look at some examples here. Now, if I just had the number 4,567, I could write that in here and put that in my place value chart, and it would all go before the decimal place because this is all a whole number, right? It's an integer that we're working with. And so after the decimal point, we really would just have zeros. And you could write it like that. We could put a 0 in the tens place. And technically that would mean that we have 0 tenths. But because there's nothing there, it's not necessary to write it. So even if you see a decimal place there, you would still just say this number as 4,567. Now, here we have 100,000, 101, and for our decimal place, we say the word and, 1/10. So writing that in, you can see where all the digits go. Our first number makes it all the way over to the 100,000s, which again, we read that as 100,000. And then we have the 101 in the hundreds, tens, and ones place. And after the decimal, we have the number 1 in the tenths place. Now, when you're reading a decimal, again, you're going to say the word and where the decimal goes. So 100,000, 101, and 1/10. And how we find out how to say the decimal is we look at where it ends. So this one, it ends in the tenths place, right? That's the last decimal place that we have. So I go to that one, I read the number that comes after the decimal, which is just the number 1, and then I read what place it falls in, the last place value that it falls in, and that's the tenths. Now we can see a different example here. This is the number, and you see 0.5632. And if we put that on our place value chart, of course, we're going to make sure there's a 0 next to the ones column there, so that way we can recognize that there are no whole numbers here. And then we can put that period or decimal point in between the following numbers, which is 5,632. Okay, that's what comes after the decimal place. Now, that's how we start to read it, right? We read it by what we see after the decimal, 5,632. And then we have to put the place value that it lands on with that last digit there. So since the last digit is 2 and that lands in the 10,000ths column, I would say 5,632 10,000ths. Now, in this case, I know I said before that we need to say and where there's a decimal. But here, because we have no whole numbers, we don't need to use the word and. You would not say 0 and 5,632 10,000ths. You would just say it as 5,632 10,000ths. And that's it. All right, so for this one, we see all of our digit boxes filled up. So if we put all of those in order where you can see them on the place value chart, we would read this out by saying 429,863 and 14,574 100,000ths. So again, I look after that decimal place, right? Just look at the numbers after the decimal place, and we read what that number would say, 14,574. And then we put it in the context of where the last digit hits. So since that last digit, 4, hits in the 100,000ths place, we end it with 100,000. So you can try this on your own. If you're working on identifying place value or just need to organize your numbers in a new way, you can use a chart like the one on the screen to be able to do that. There are lots of these charts out on the internet, and I would encourage you just to do a Google search for a place value chart, and you'll be able to find one that works well for you. Thank you so much for joining me today for this lesson. I hope that you learned something new, and I hope that you'll check us out by looking at our other YouTube videos and subscribing to our YouTube channel. We also have an Instagram and a Facebook, and you can check us out at helmsacademy.org.